The gavel slams down. Another deadbeat father with excuses. You people are all the same. Marcus Thompson stands frozen at the podium, his daughter's medical bills trembling in his hands. The courtroom laughs. Judge Patricia Harrington waves him away like garbage. Security grabs his arm. 90 seconds. That's all she gave him. 90 seconds to fight for his child's life. But Judge Harrington made one mistake. She didn't ask what he did for a living. If you think you know where this story goes, you're wrong. Stay until the end. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The hand closed around Marcus Thompson's arm like a vice. Sir, you need to leave. Now. Marcus didn't resist. He'd learned that lesson 40 years ago growing up black in Birmingham. You don't resist. You don't raise your voice. You don't give them a reason. I'm leaving, he said, his voice steady. I'm complying with the court's order. Then move faster. The security officer's badge caught the fluorescent light. Jenkins R. badge number 4471. Marcus filed it away automatically, the habit of a lifetime spent in courtrooms. Behind him, Judge Patricia Harrington's voice rang out, already calling the next case. Already moving on. Already forgetting the black man she'd just humiliated in front of 30 strangers. Docket number 7429, Williams versus Williams, child support modification. The next father was already approaching the podium, the machine grinding on. Marcus walked. 1 step, 2. The marble floor stretched toward the exit. 50 feet of institutional indifference. 50 feet of swallowed pride. A clerk watched from behind the information desk, arms crossed, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Above them both, a security camera blinked red. Recording everything. Good. You know, the security officer said, his grip tightening as they reached the doors. I've been doing this job 18 years. I've seen hundreds of you people come through here thinking you're special, thinking the rules don't apply to you. You all end up the same way. How's that? Paying up and shutting up. The automatic doors opened. April air rushed in, warm and thick with Georgia humidity. Marcus stopped at the threshold, turned, looked at the officer's badge, then at his face. You will remember this moment, Officer Jenkins. Jenkins laughed, short, sharp. The sound of a man who'd heard every variation of that phrase and watched every variation walk away, defeated. Sure I will, sir. Have a nice day. The doors closed. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, sunlight falling across his shoulders. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. The kind of rage you learn to bury so deep it becomes part of your bones. In his jacket pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. How did it go? Baby, did the judge help? He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Not yet, Mama. But she will. 4 hours earlier, Marcus Thompson had stood in his closet looking at his judicial robes. They hung in the back, pressed and perfect, the formal uniform of a man who'd spent 32 years climbing every rung of the American legal system. Public defender, assistant U.S. attorney, federal prosecutor, and now, for the past 6 years, Judge Marcus Elijah Thompson of the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, one of 17 judges whose decisions shape the law for Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. 37 million Americans lived under his jurisdiction. Today, none of that mattered. He passed the robes, reached instead for the worn khaki jacket he'd bought at a thrift store last week. $15. A jacket that said nothing about the man wearing it. A jacket that would let him be invisible. On the kitchen counter, a folder sat waiting. Inside, medical bills, insurance denials, documentation of his daughter Maya's treatment. Everything the law required for a child support modification hearing. Maya was 8 years old. 3 years ago, her mother Denise had taken her to Chicago, remarried a man named Gerald, who sold insurance and drove a BMW. The custody arrangement was standard. Maya lived with her mother during the school year, summers with Marcus. It had worked. Until 6 months ago, when Maya was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. The bills had started arriving in November. First hundreds, then thousands. Insulin, glucose monitors, specialist appointments. The insurance Denise's new husband carried had a $12,000 deductible. Gerald made good money, but not good enough to absorb those costs without complaint. So Denise had filed a motion. Child support increase, emergency hearing. The argument was simple. Marcus made more money. Marcus should pay more. What the motion didn't mention was that Marcus had already offered to pay Maya's medical bills directly, had offered to add her to his own federal insurance plan, had offered every solution a reasonable co-parent could offer. Denise's lawyer had rejected everything. They wanted the modification on the record. They wanted the increased payments flowing through the system. They wanted the paper trail. What they really wanted, Marcus knew, was leverage, control. The ability to come back to court again and again using his daughter's health as a weapon. He could have fought it the easy way. One phone call, one piece of official letterhead. This is Judge Marcus Thompson of the 11th Circuit. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about my case. The modification would have disappeared. The hearing would have been continued indefinitely. Professional courtesy extended questions never asked. But that wasn't the point. Marcus picked up the folder, checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. His hearing was scheduled for 10:30. On the refrigerator held by a magnet Maya had made at summer camp was a photograph. Father and daughter at the beach last July. Maya grinning with a gap-toothed smile, sand in her hair, her small hand wrapped around his finger. He touched the photograph, then walked out the door. The Clayton County Family Courthouse was a 3-story concrete block built in 1974 and renovated never. The parking lot was already filling when Marcus arrived at 8:45. Minivans and pickup trucks, a few sedans older than their drivers, the vehicles of people who couldn't afford to miss work but couldn't afford not to show up. He parked in the back lot, public parking, not the attorney spaces near the entrance. A woman was struggling to get a stroller out of her trunk while balancing a toddler on her hip. Files tucked under her arm slipping. The desperation of someone trying to do 3 things at once with 2 hands. Marcus walked over. "Can I help you with that?" She looked up startled, assessed him quickly. Black man, 50s, worn jacket, non-threatening. "Thank you, I got it." "You sure I've got 2 free hands and nowhere to be for an hour?" She hesitated, then nodded. "The stroller's stuck on something." He freed the stroller, unfolded it, held it steady while she strapped in the toddler. "Thank you," she said again. "Really? What's your case about, if you don't mind me asking?" "Custody modification. My ex wants to reduce his weekends because his new girlfriend doesn't like having kids around." She laughed bitter. 3 years he fought for joint custody. Now he wants out. "You have documentation of the original agreement." "I have everything. Not that it matters. Last time I was here, the judge gave me about 2 minutes before she decided I was wasting her time." "Which judge?" "Harrington, Patricia Harrington." Marcus nodded. "What time's your hearing?" 11:15. Yours, 10:30. "Good luck," she said. "You'll need it with that one." He watched her walk toward the courthouse, then followed. Security took 11 minutes. Marcus emptied his pockets, removed his belt, placed his folder on the conveyor, walked through the metal detector. It beeped. "Step aside, sir." The officer was young, mid-20s, name tag Williams. He ran the wand over Marcus slowly, thoroughly, taking his time in a way that felt less like procedure and more like performance. Purpose of visit. Family court. Hearing at 10:30. You got representation. Myself. Officer Williams raised an eyebrow. A smirk crossed his face. Good luck with that. Harrington doesn't go easy on walk-ins. First data point. I'll manage. That's what they all say. Marcus collected his belongings, noted the officer's badge number, noted his tone. Not hostile exactly, just dismissive. The casual assumption that a black man without a lawyer had already lost. The elevator was out of service. Handwritten sign taped to the doors. Use stairs. Maintenance in progress. He took the stairs, counted the steps, noted the worn treads, the scuffed walls, the particular smell of old buildings that hadn't been properly maintained in decades. Budget cuts made visible. Services deferred. Family Courtroom 3B was on the second floor. The sign on the door read, Judge Patricia Harrington presiding. No cell phones. No food or beverages. No disruptions. The waiting area was a row of plastic chairs bolted to the floor. Most were occupied. An elderly black man with a cane. A young white woman with 2 children climbing on her lap. A Hispanic man in work boots still wearing his construction company shirt. 2 teenage girls whispering to each other, one of them visibly pregnant. All here for their 3 minutes with the judge. Marcus took a seat at the end of the row, opened his folder, reviewed his documents for the 4th time. At 9:00, a clerk emerged from the courtroom, mid-30s, hair pulled back tight. The expression of someone who processed 500 cases a week and had stopped seeing individual faces. Patterson, Rodriguez, Williams, first block, front 2 rows inside. The elderly man with the cane struggled to stand. Marcus watched him grip the armrest, push himself up. No one offered help. He made it upright on his own. The small group filed into the courtroom. The door closed. Marcus waited. At 9:47, he approached the clerk's desk. "Excuse me, I'm Thompson. Marcus Thompson. I'm on the 10:30 docket." The clerk didn't look up. Her fingers scrolled across a tablet. Thompson. Child support modification. Petitioner Denise Thompson Carter versus respondent Marcus Thompson. That's correct. You've been moved to 1:15 p.m. Sit in the back until called. The notice specified 10:30. Now she looked up. Something flickered in her eyes. Not hostility, annoyance. The particular irritation reserved for people who don't understand how things work around here. Schedule changed. Court's discretion. You can wait until 1:15, or you can stipulate to the petitioner's demands and go home. Your choice. Was I notified of this change? You're being notified now. Marcus held her gaze, studied her name badge. Meredith Collins, deputy clerk. I'll wait. He returned to the plastic chairs, took a seat in the back row, opened his notepad. Case rescheduled without notice. Clerk Collins. Selective docket manipulation document pattern if observed in other pro se respondents. Second data point. The next 3 hours became a masterclass in institutional efficiency. From his seat in the waiting area, Marcus could hear fragments of what happened inside room 3B. The door opened and closed every 20 minutes. Batches of litigants emerged, some relieved, some angry, most wearing the particular numbness of people who'd just been processed by a system that never saw them as individuals. He entered the courtroom at 11:00, took a seat in the gallery, observed. Judge Patricia Harrington presided from an elevated bench at the front of the room. Early 60s, blonde hair going gray at the temples, reading glasses perched on her nose. The particular posture of a woman who'd occupied that bench for 19 years and had forgotten what it felt like to earn respect rather than demand it. The pattern crystallized within minutes. Litigants with attorneys received 5 to 7 minutes each. Professional courtesy exchanged. Negotiations conducted in the language of legal procedure. Outcomes predetermined but dressed in the appearance of due process. Litigants appearing pro se received 2 minutes, sometimes less. Marcus watched a young black father approach the podium. His case was a visitation dispute. He held a folder thick with documents. Your Honor, I have evidence that my ex-wife has been denying my scheduled weekends. Text messages, emails, a calendar showing. Mr. Davis, Harrington's voice cut through like a blade. This court doesn't have time for your conspiracy theories about your ex-wife. She's the custodial parent. She makes the decisions. But, Your Honor, the custody agreement specifically says... The custody agreement says what I say it says. Motion denied. Next case. Your Honor, please. I haven't seen my son in 3 months. If you'd just look at bailiff. Harrington waved her hand. Theatrical. Dismissive. If Mr. Davis isn't seated in 5 seconds, remove him from my courtroom. The young father sat. His evidence remained in his folder. Unseen. Unchallenged. Marcus wrote in his notepad, "Blackmail denied opportunity to present documentation. Hearing time 47 seconds. Same Judge White male petitioner in prior case 6 minutes 12 seconds. Evidence review 0 for Davis. Full consideration for prior case." The pattern continued. A Hispanic grandmother trying to get temporary custody of her grandchildren while her daughter completed rehab. Harrington interrupted her after 30 seconds. "Ma'am, do you have a lawyer? No. Then file the proper paperwork and come back when you understand how this works." A white man in a golf shirt explaining why he needed to reduce his child support because he'd started a new business. Harrington listened, asked questions, granted a 3-month review period with reduced payments in the interim. "I understand starting a business is difficult, Mr. Crawford. The court wants to support fathers who are trying to build something for their families." The grandmother was trying to save her grandchildren from foster care. The businessman was trying to pay less for kids he barely visited. One got 45 seconds and contempt. One got 8 minutes and compassion. Marcus filled 3 pages of notes. At 1:09 p.m. the clerk emerged. "Thompson, Marcus Thompson." He stood, gathered his folder, walked toward the courtroom doors. The elderly man with the cane, Mr. Patterson, caught his eye as he passed. The old man shook his head slowly. A warning, a wish of luck, a recognition of what was coming. Marcus nodded, then entered room 3B. The courtroom was smaller than it looked from the gallery. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The American flag hung limply beside the Georgia state flag. Judge Harrington's bench loomed above the podium where respondents stood to receive judgment. At the petitioner's table, a lawyer Marcus didn't recognize sat with a thin file. Expensive suit. Designer watch. The kind of attorney who charged $400 an hour to process custody disputes for clients who could afford to weaponize the system. Beside him, a video screen showed Denise's face. She was appearing remotely. Of course she was. A 4-hour drive from Chicago, and she couldn't be bothered to show up in person for a hearing about their daughter's medical care. "Mr. Thompson?" Harrington didn't look up from her papers. "You're the respondent in case 2024 FC 4471. Petitioner seeks modification of child support pursuant to the minor child's increased medical expenses." "Yes, Your Honor." "I see you're appearing pro se." "Yes, Your Honor. I'm representing myself." Now Harrington looked up. Her eyes swept over him. The worn jacket, the department store tie, the folder of documents in his hands. Her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. But Marcus had spent 32 years reading faces in courtrooms. He saw it. Dismissal. Categorization. The instant judgment of a woman who'd already decided what he was before he'd spoken a word. "Mr. Thompson, before we proceed, I want to make something clear." Harrington removed her reading glasses, set them on the bench with a deliberate click. "This court takes child support obligations very seriously. The welfare of children depends on both parents meeting their financial responsibilities. Do you understand?" "I understand, Your Honor." "Good. Because I've reviewed the petitioner's motion and I have to say the numbers are quite clear. Your daughter's medical expenses have increased substantially. The petitioner is seeking a modification of $1 and $200 per month to cover those costs. Do you have any response?" "I do, Your Honor. I've prepared documentation that I'd like to present to the court." Documentation. The word hung in the air. Harrington leaned back in her chair. The gesture was theatrical, exaggerated, playing to the gallery. "Mr. Thompson, let me ask you something. Do you have a lawyer?" "No, Your Honor. As I said, I'm representing myself." She glanced at the petitioner's attorney. Something passed between them. Mr. Kendrick, does the petitioner have any objection to Mr. Thompson presenting his documentation? The attorney stood smoothly. Your Honor, the petitioner's position is straightforward. The child's medical expenses are documented. The respondent's income is documented. The calculation is simple mathematics. We don't believe any additional documentation is necessary. I tend to agree. Harrington looked back at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, this is family court, not the Supreme Court. We don't need elaborate presentations. We need parents who meet their obligations. Your Honor, with respect, the documentation I have directly addresses the petitioner's claims. I believe the court would benefit from reviewing it before making a decision. You believe the court would benefit? Harrington laughed. A short, sharp sound that echoed off the walls. In the gallery, a few people laughed too. Nervous, reflexive. The laughter of people who wanted to be on the winning side of a power imbalance. Mr. Thompson, I've been sitting on this bench for 19 years. I've heard every excuse, every sob story, every creative explanation for why fathers can't pay what they owe. You know what I've learned? Marcus said nothing. I've learned that fathers who show up with folders full of paper are usually trying to hide something. They think if they throw enough documents at the court won't notice that they're deadbeats trying to avoid their responsibilities. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Harrington's voice rose. I've also learned that certain demographics have certain patterns. Certain types of fathers make certain types of excuses. And frankly, Mr. Thompson, you fit a profile I've seen hundreds of times in this courtroom. The words landed like stones. Certain demographics. Certain patterns. Marcus felt the rage rising. The same rage he'd buried for 40 years. The rage of every black man who'd ever stood in a courtroom and watched a white judge decide his fate based on the color of his skin. He breathed, controlled it, kept his voice level. Your Honor, I'd like to note for the record that I find that characterization inappropriate and potentially prejudicial. Harrington's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I'd also like to request that the court review my documentation before rendering judgment. The documents include medical bills showing that I have already offered to pay my daughter's expenses directly, insurance documentation showing that I have offered to add her to my federal employee health plan, which would cover her treatment with no deductible, and correspondence from the petitioner's attorney rejecting both offers. Federal employee health plan. Harrington's voice dripped with sarcasm. What are you, a postal worker? In the gallery, more laughter. No. Your Honor, I work for the federal government in a different capacity, but that's not relevant to the documentation I'm trying to present. Mr. Thompson, Harrington leaned forward. I decide what's relevant in my courtroom, not you. And what's relevant right now is that you have a daughter with medical needs and you're standing here wasting this court's time with paper instead of stepping up like a real father. I am stepping up, Your Honor. I've offered to pay every medical bill. I've offered insurance coverage that would eliminate the need for a support modification entirely. The petitioner has refused these offers because she knows you'll find a way to weasel out of it. Harrington cut him off. I've seen it before. Fathers who promise the moon and deliver nothing. Fathers who disappear the moment the ink is dry. Your daughter needs security, Mr. Thompson, not promises. Your Honor, if you'd review the documentation. I've heard enough. Harrington picked up her gavel. The court finds that the respondent has failed to demonstrate any legitimate basis for opposing the modification. The petitioner's request is granted. Child support is hereby increased by $1,200 per month effective immediately. Additionally, given the respondent's hostile and uncooperative attitude in these proceedings, the court is issuing a warning. She pointed the gavel at Marcus. Any failure to comply with this order will result in contempt charges. You will be arrested. You will go to jail. And Mr. Thompson jail is full of fathers who thought they could outsmart the system. You don't want to join them. Marcus stood perfectly still. His daughter's medical bills were in his hands. Documentation proving everything he'd said. Evidence that would have taken 3 minutes to review. 90 seconds. That's how long she'd given him. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I'd like to note my objection for appeal purposes." The gavel froze mid-swing. "You'd like to what?" "I'd like to note my objection. Under Georgia Code Section 151128, a party has the right to—" "Mr. Thompson." Harrington's face reddened. "I don't care what code section you pulled off the internet. This isn't law and order. You don't get to make speeches. You get to pay your child support and be grateful I'm not holding you in contempt right now." "Your Honor, I'm entitled to." Bailiff. The security officer was already moving, already walking toward the podium, already reaching for Marcus's arm. "Mr. Thompson is being disruptive. Remove him from my courtroom." "I'm not being disruptive." Marcus said, his voice calm. "I'm attempting to exercise my legal rights." "Your legal rights." Harrington laughed again, louder this time. "That's adorable. Another deadbeat father who thinks he knows the law better than the judge." She looked at the gallery, playing to her audience. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Thompson. I've forgotten more law than you'll ever learn from Google. You people come in here with your printouts and your attitude thinking you can challenge 19 years of experience. You can't. You won't. And the sooner you accept that, the better off your daughter will be." The bailiff's hand closed on Marcus's arm. "Let's go, sir. Nice and easy." Marcus looked at the judge one last time, memorized her face, her expression, the particular contempt in her eyes. Then he gathered his folder and walked. Behind him, Harrington's voice rang out across the courtroom. "Next case. Rodriguez versus Rodriguez. Custody modification." The machine grinding on. The hallway outside room 3B was empty, except for a water fountain and a bench bolted to the wall. The bailiff walked Marcus all the way to the elevator bank before releasing his arm. "You're lucky she didn't hold you in contempt," the bailiff said. "I wasn't in contempt. I was trying to present evidence." Same thing in her courtroom. The bailiff shrugged. "Word of advice, just pay the money. It's easier." "Easier for who?" The bailiff didn't answer, just walked back toward room 3B. Marcus stood alone in the hallway, his folder still in his hands. 3 months of preparation. Documentation that would have taken 3 minutes to review. Evidence that proved he'd offered more than the modification required. None of it seen, none of it considered, none of it mattering. He took the stairs down, walked through security. Officer Williams was still there processing another line of citizens. "How'd it go?" Williams called out, the smirk still on his face. Marcus didn't answer. The glass doors opened. April air rushed in. He stepped outside, stood on the courthouse steps, and let the sunlight fall across his shoulders. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "This is Judge Marcus Thompson. I need to speak with Inspector Rodriguez at the Georgia Judicial Conduct Commission. Tell her it's urgent." That night, Maya called him on FaceTime. She was in her bedroom in Chicago. Pink walls, stuffed animals on the bed, a poster of some pop star he didn't recognize. "Daddy, Mommy said you went to court today." "I did, baby." "Did the judge help us?" Marcus looked at his daughter's face. 8 years old, gap-toothed smile. Eyes that still believed the world was fair. "Not today, sweetheart, but Daddy's working on it." "Are you sad?" He paused. How do you explain injustice to an 8-year-old? How do you tell her that some people look at her father and see a deadbeat, a profile, a demographic pattern? You don't. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm determined." What's determined? It means Daddy's not giving up. It means when something's wrong, you don't just accept it. You fight to make it right. Maya nodded solemnly, like she understood. "Daddy." "Yes, baby." "I miss you." "I miss you too, sweetheart. So much." "When can I come visit?" "Summer, baby. Just a few more weeks. We'll go to the beach just like last year." "Promise. I promise." She smiled, that gap-toothed smile that broke his heart every single time. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Maya. More than anything in the world." The call ended. Marcus sat in the darkness of his living room, looking at his daughter's face frozen on the screen. Then he opened his laptop and began to type. Complaint to Georgia Judicial Conduct Commission, RE. Judge Patricia Harrington, Clayton County, Family Court. I, Marcus Elijah Thompson, do hereby file this formal complaint regarding conduct I personally witnessed and experienced on April 14, 2024. The first domino was ready to fall. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story has traveled. 3 days passed before the Judicial Conduct Commission returned his call. Marcus was in his chambers at the 11th Circuit when his personal phone buzzed. He'd been reviewing a civil rights appeal from Alabama, the irony not lost on him as he read about a plaintiff who'd been denied due process in a municipal court. Judge Thompson, this is Inspector Carmen Rodriguez from the Georgia Judicial Conduct Commission. I received your complaint. Thank you for calling back, Inspector. I have to be honest with you, sir. Rodriguez's voice carried the particular weariness of someone who'd heard too many complaints that went nowhere. We receive dozens of complaints about Judge Harrington every year. Most of them don't result in action. Why not? Insufficient documentation, hearsay, complainants who can't articulate specific procedural violations. The Commission requires clear evidence of judicial misconduct, not just unhappy litigants who didn't get the outcome they wanted. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Through his office window, the Atlanta skyline stretched toward the horizon. What if I told you I have that documentation? I'd say I've heard that before too. What if I told you I have audio from the courtroom statistical analysis of case outcomes, a pattern that goes back years? Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Mr. Thompson, who exactly are you? Right now I'm a father who was denied the opportunity to present evidence in a child support case. I'm a citizen who was called a deadbeat and threatened with jail for exercising my legal rights. I'm one of what I suspect are hundreds of people who've experienced similar treatment in Judge Harrington's courtroom. That's not what I asked. I know. Another pause. The Commission meets monthly to review complaints. The next meeting is May 15th. If you can provide documented evidence of specific procedural violations, statistical patterns, and corroborating testimony from other affected parties, I can present your case for formal investigation. What happens if the Commission approves an investigation? Then I investigate. Subpoena power, access to court records, the ability to compel testimony. And if they don't approve, then your complaint joins the pile, filed and forgotten. Marcus looked at the calendar on his desk. May 15th was 4 weeks away. I'll have everything you need by May 10th. Mr. Thompson, Rodriguez's voice softened slightly. I've been doing this work for 12 years. I've seen a lot of complaints that started with passion and ended with nothing. Building a case like this takes time, resources, access to information most citizens can't get. I understand. Do you? Because what you're describing, statistical analysis, pattern documentation, corroborating witnesses, that's not a one-man job. That's an investigation. Marcus smiled, though she couldn't see it. Then I better get started. He hung up and stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 3 years. Rosa Martinez, Public Defender, Clayton County. They'd met at a legal conference in 2019. She'd given a presentation on systemic bias in family courts that had stuck with him long after the conference ended. Passionate, detailed, the kind of advocate who saw patterns others missed. He dialed. Rosa Martinez. Ms. Martinez, my name is Marcus Thompson. We met at the Georgia Bar Association conference a few years ago. You gave a presentation on family court bias. I remember. You asked the question about statistical methodology. A pause. What can I do for you, Mr. Thompson? I need your help documenting a pattern. Judge Patricia Harrington, Clayton County Family Court. The silence on the other end lasted 5 full seconds. Where can we meet? The coffee shop was in a strip mall 2 miles from the Clayton County Courthouse. Neutral territory. The kind of place where conversations happened without being overheard. Rosa Martinez was already there when Marcus arrived. Late 40s. Dark hair streaked with gray. Eyes that had seen too much and still kept looking. She didn't stand when he approached. Just watched him walk across the room with an expression he couldn't quite read. Mr. Thompson. Ms. Martinez, thank you for meeting me. I almost didn't. She gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down. He sat. I've been documenting Judge Harrington for 6 years. Rosa said, her voice low. 73 cases. Exposed patterns of disparate treatment. Filed 19 formal complaints with the Judicial Conduct Commission. You know what happened? Nothing. Less than nothing. The complaints were buried. The evidence was ignored. 3 years ago, I was told informally that if I kept filing complaints, my cases would start getting assigned to Harrington's courtroom exclusively. She laughed bitter. A threat disguised as scheduling. But you kept documenting. I kept documenting. Because someday I told myself someone would listen, someone would care, someone would have the power to actually do something. She studied his face. The question is, Mr. Thompson, why do you care? One bad experience in family court doesn't usually turn people into crusaders. Marcus considered his answer carefully. Let's just say I have more resources than most complainants. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. Rosa leaned back, crossed her arms. I've been burned before. Citizens who showed up full of righteous anger, promised to fight the good fight, then disappeared when they realized how hard it actually is, how long it takes, how much the system pushes back. I won't disappear. Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. Something in his voice made her pause. She studied him again longer this time. Who are you, Mr. Thompson? Someone who experienced what your 73 clients experienced. Someone who stood at that podium and was told he didn't matter before he'd finished his first sentence. Someone who was laughed at, threatened, and removed from a courtroom for trying to present evidence. That happens every day in her courtroom. I know, that's why I'm here. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. 73 cases. Statistical analysis. Outcome comparisons broken down by race, income level, and representation status. Timeline of buried complaints. Names and contact information for witnesses willing to testify. She slid the folder across the table. 6 years of my life is in that folder, Mr. Thompson. 6 years of documenting what everyone in that courthouse knows, but nobody will say out loud. Patricia Harrington runs a plantation, not a courtroom, and the system protects her because the system benefits from her. Marcus opened the folder. The first page was a statistical summary. His eyes scanned the numbers. Average hearing time for Black Pro Se litigants, 2.3 minutes. Average hearing time for White Pro Se litigants, 5.1 minutes. Average hearing time for represented parties, 7.4 minutes. Outcomes for Black fathers in custody disputes, 78% unfavorable. Outcomes for white fathers in custody disputes, 34% unfavorable. These numbers, Marcus said quietly, have they been verified? Every case, every outcome, every minute counted from court recordings. The Commission has seen this. The Commission has filed this. There's a difference. Rosa's voice hardened. Felix Okonkwo, the court administrator, is Judge Harrington's cousin by marriage. Every complaint that goes to the Commission gets routed through his office first. Every piece of evidence gets reviewed before it reaches the investigators. Coincidentally, every complaint comes back marked insufficient documentation or unsubstantiated claims. The administrator is related to the judge. Welcome to Clayton County, Mr. Thompson. Everyone's related to everyone. Everyone owes someone. And anyone who tries to change anything learns very quickly how things work around here. Marcus closed the folder. What would it take to break through to actually get an investigation that goes somewhere? Rosa laughed again. That same bitter sound. A miracle. Or someone so high up that Felix Okonkwo can't bury the complaint. Someone with connections to people who can't be pressured. Someone who... She stopped, looked at him with new eyes. Someone like a federal judge, maybe? Marcus said nothing. That's it, isn't it? Rosa leaned forward. You're not just some father with a grudge. You're somebody. That's why you won't tell me who you are. Does it matter? It matters because if you're somebody, this might actually work. And if this actually works, everything changes. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. 6 years, Mr. Thompson. 6 years I've been screaming into the void. 6 years of watching fathers lose their children because a racist judge decided they didn't deserve them. 6 years of filing complaints that disappear into filing cabinets and never come out. If there's even a chance this could be different, there's a chance. How much of a chance? Marcus met her eyes. I need 4 weeks. Help me document everything. Help me find witnesses who'll testify. Help me build a case so solid that no administrator can bury it and no commission can ignore it. And then what? And then I make sure the right people see it. Rosa stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took the folder back. I'll need copies of everything you have, your complaint, the court recording from your hearing, any documentation you've gathered. Done. And I'll need access. There are people in that courthouse who've been keeping their heads down for years. Good people who know what's happening but are too scared to speak up. If they see someone with power actually fighting back, some of them might talk. Set up the meetings. I'll be there. Rosa stood, extended her hand. I don't know who you are, Mr. Thompson, but I'm glad you walked into that courtroom. Marcus shook her hand. I'm glad too, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus lived a double life. By day, he was Judge Marcus Thompson of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. He reviewed cases. He wrote opinions. He sat on panels with his colleagues and discussed the finer points of constitutional law. By night and weekend, he was just Marcus. A father with a grievance. A citizen documenting injustice. A man who'd discovered that the system he'd dedicated his life to serving was broken in ways he'd never fully understood. Rosa introduced him to the network, a loose coalition of public defenders, social workers, and community advocates who'd been tracking Harrington's patterns for years. People who'd filed complaints and been ignored. People who'd tried to fight back and been crushed. He met James Patterson on a Saturday morning. 73 years old, retired Army. A grandfather who'd spent 4 years trying to get visitation rights with his grandchildren after his daughter's death. Judge Harrington gave me 90 seconds. Patterson said, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long gone cold. 90 seconds to explain why a grandfather should be allowed to see his grandchildren. She called me a disruptive influence. Said I was probably the reason my daughter had problems in the first place. Did you file a complaint? Filed 3 of them. Never heard back on any. Patterson's eyes were wet. My grandchildren don't know who I am anymore, Mr. Thompson. The oldest one, Michael, he was 5 when this started. He's 9 now. Last time I saw him was 3 years ago. He hid behind his stepfather's leg like I was a stranger. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back 4 years. Patterson set down his cup. But if there's a chance to stop this from happening to other grandfathers, other families, I'll testify. I'll say whatever needs to be said. Marcus met Keisha Washington the following week. The young mother he'd seen in the courthouse parking lot on the day of his hearing. She'd lost her custody modification case that same afternoon. The judge told me I was lucky to have any custody at all, Keisha said, her toddler squirming on her lap. Lucky, like I should be grateful my ex gets to reduce his time with his own children because his new girlfriend doesn't like kids. How long was your hearing? Maybe 2 minutes? She kept cutting me off. Every time I tried to explain, she'd say, "I've heard enough," or "That's not relevant." Meanwhile, my ex's lawyer talked for like 10 minutes straight and she just nodded along. Do you have documentation, the original custody agreement correspondence, about the modification? I have everything. Keisha's jaw tightened. I'm not stupid, Mr. Thompson. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what to do about it. Now you do. Marcus met 11 more witnesses over the following weeks. Fathers, mothers, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. All of them had stories. All of them had documentation. All of them had been ignored. The pattern was undeniable. Harrington treated minority litigants with contempt. She denied them time. She denied them evidence review. She issued harsher penalties, shorter hearings, more dismissive rulings. But there was something else. Something Rosa had discovered in her 6 years of documentation that she'd never been able to prove. Follow the money, she told Marcus one evening, spreading financial documents across her desk. Every modification case, every enforcement action, every contempt finding. Where does the money go? Child support payments go to the custodial parent. Through what agency? The State Child Support Enforcement Division. And who handles collection in Clayton County? Marcus looked at the document she was pointing to. A contract between Clayton County and a private company called Family First Collections. A private collection agency. Contracted by the county 3 years after Harrington took the bench. Coincidentally, Family First's CEO is married to Felix Okonkwo's sister, the court administrator. The same one who buries complaints against Harrington. Rosa pulled out another document. Family First takes a 12% fee on every dollar collected. The more cases Harrington pushes through, the more modifications she grants, the more enforcement actions she orders, the more money flows to Family First. She's running a revenue operation. She's running a machine. Process fathers as fast as possible. Maximize support orders. Maximize collection fees. Minimize any resistance that might slow down the pipeline. Rosa's voice was flat. Justice isn't the product, Mr. Thompson. Money is. Marcus stared at the documents. The scope of it was larger than he'd imagined. Not just one racist judge in one courtroom. A system. A network. Corruption disguised as efficiency. This is bigger than a Judicial Conduct Commission complaint. I know. This is federal. Civil rights violations. Financial fraud. Possibly RICO charges. Rosa looked at him sharply. How would you know what constitutes federal charges? Marcus didn't answer. Who are you? Rosa asked again. And don't give me that just a citizen routine. Citizens don't throw around terms like RICO charges. He considered telling her. Considered revealing everything. But not yet. Not until the case was built. Not until the evidence was so overwhelming that no one could dismiss it. Someone who's going to make sure this gets to the people who can actually do something about it. Federal people. The right people. Rosa studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. 4 more days until the commission deadline. What do you need from me? Everything. Every document. Every witness statement. Every piece of evidence you've gathered in 6 years. And then we see if the system can ignore itself. The night before the commission deadline, Marcus's mother called. Baby, you sound tired. I'm fine, Mama. Don't lie to your mother. I've known you for 56 years. I know when something's wrong. Marcus set down the document he'd been reviewing, rubbed his eyes. It's just this case I'm working on. The family court thing, the one with Maya. Partly. Marcus. His mother's voice softened. I remember when you were 10 years old and Bobby Mitchell pushed you down on the playground because he said black boys couldn't play on the good swings. You came home with scraped knees and fire in your eyes. You said, Mama, I'm going to be a judge someday, and I'm going to make sure nobody gets pushed down for no reason. I remember. You became that judge, baby. You've been that judge for 32 years, but some fights you can't win by yourself. I'm not by myself. Then why do you sound so alone? Marcus didn't have an answer. You always did carry too much on your shoulders, his mother continued. Even when you were little, always trying to fix things, always trying to make things right. Your father was the same way, stubborn to the bone, wouldn't ask for help even when he was drowning. I'm not drowning, Mama. Not yet, but I hear water rising. Marcus laughed despite himself. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Now get some sleep. Whatever you're fighting for, it'll still be there in the morning. I know. And Marcus. Yes, Mama. When? He hung up the phone, looked at the stack of documents on his desk. 73 cases from Rosa, 11 witness statements, financial records connecting Harrington to Family First, to Felix Okonkwo, statistical analysis that would make any reasonable person see the pattern. 4 weeks of work compressed into folders and flash drives. Tomorrow he would submit everything to Inspector Rodriguez. Tomorrow, the commission would have no choice but to investigate. Tomorrow, the first domino would officially fall. But tonight one more task remained. He opened his laptop, navigated to a secure email system, typed an address he'd memorized years ago, a contact at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. David, I'm sending you materials related to a municipal court in Georgia. Pattern or practice violations, financial fraud, systemic civil rights abuses. The State Commission gets it first, but I suspect they'll try to bury it. When they do, I'll need federal intervention. Review the documents. Tell me what you think. M. He attached the files. Hit send. Then he closed his laptop and sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about Bobby Mitchell and the good swings and a 10-year-old boy who'd promised himself that someday nobody would get pushed down for no reason. The deadline arrived. Marcus delivered the complaint package to Inspector Rodriguez personally. 237 pages, 73 documented cases, 11 sworn witness statements, statistical analysis, financial records, audio recordings. Rodriguez took the package with both hands, felt its weight. This is everything you asked for, and more. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since they'd met. Mr. Thompson, I've been doing this work for 12 years. I've never seen a complaint package like this from a pro se complainant. This is the kind of documentation that takes teams of lawyers months to assemble. I had help. From who? People who've been waiting 6 years for someone to listen. Rodriguez set the package on her desk, leafed through the first few pages. The commission meets on the 15th. I'll present this personally. And if they try to bury it, she looked up. Mr. Thompson, whatever happens in that commission meeting, this package exists. It's documented. It's been received. Copies exist in multiple locations, I assume. You assume correctly. Then even if the commission fails to act, the evidence doesn't disappear. She paused. Someone with the right connections could make sure it reaches other agencies, federal agencies, agencies that don't answer to Felix Okonkwo or anyone connected to him. Someone could. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The commission meeting is May 15th at 9 a.m. You're entitled to be present when your complaint is discussed. I'll be there. Mr. Thompson. She hesitated. I don't know who you really are, but I hope you're someone who can see this through. Because if this package is accurate, what's happening in that courthouse isn't just misconduct. It's criminal. And criminals don't go quietly. Marcus met her eyes. Neither do I. The Georgia State Capitol building rose against the morning sky as Marcus pulled into the parking garage on May 15th. He'd driven down from Atlanta the night before, stayed in a hotel room he'd paid for with cash, spent the hours before dawn, reviewing his testimony one final time. Today, everything changed. His phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. I'm here. 3rd row. James Patterson is here too. Keisha. 7 others. We're ready. He typed back, thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. Win first. Marcus pocketed his phone and walked toward the building. Same worn jacket he'd worn to Harrington's courtroom 6 weeks ago. Same department store tie. Same folder of documents, though this one was much thicker now. The security line moved slowly. When he reached the checkpoint, he placed his belongings on the conveyor and walked through the metal detector without incident. No beeping. No extra screening. No officer with a smirk asking about his purpose. Small mercies. The Judicial Conduct Commission chamber was on the 3rd floor. He took the elevator, watching the numbers climb, feeling his heart rate steady with each passing floor. 32 years of courtroom experience had taught him to control the physical symptoms of stress. The racing pulse, the shallow breathing, the tremor in the hands. Today, he felt none of it. Only clarity. The chamber doors were already open when he arrived. The room was larger than he'd expected. 5 commissioners sat at an elevated table at the front. Gallery seating filled the rest of the space, already half occupied with attorneys, reporters, and citizens who'd made the trip to witness the proceedings. Rosa was exactly where she'd said she'd be. 3rd row. James Patterson beside her, his cane resting against his knee. Keisha Washington with her files clutched to her chest. The others arranged in a row behind them, faces Marcus had come to know over the past 4 weeks. Faces of people who'd been ignored, dismissed, silenced. Not today. He took a seat in the back of the gallery and waited. At 9:00 a.m., precisely, the commission chair called the proceedings to order. Commissioner Harold Washington, 72 years old. Former state Supreme Court justice. The kind of man whose reputation had been built on fairness, even when fairness was inconvenient. This session of the Georgia Judicial Conduct Commission will now come to order. We have 3 matters on today's docket. The first is complaint number 2024 JCC 4471 regarding Judge Patricia Harrington of the Clayton County Family Court. Marcus felt the room shift. Reporters sat up straighter. Pens hovered over notepads. Whatever happened in the next few hours, people would be watching. Commissioner Washington continued. Inspector Rodriguez will present the commission's preliminary findings. Judge Harrington and her counsel are present and will have an opportunity to respond. We will then hear testimony from the primary complainant and any supporting witnesses. At the respondents' table, Patricia Harrington sat with her attorney. Marcus recognized him immediately. Bernard Knox, former president of the Georgia Bar Association. The kind of lawyer you hired when you were guilty but needed to look innocent. Harrington herself looked different than she had in her courtroom, smaller somehow. Without the elevated bench, without the gavel, without the power to silence anyone who challenged her, she was just a woman in her 60s with graying hair and nervous hands. She saw Marcus in the gallery. Recognition flickered across her face. Then confusion. Then something else, the beginning of understanding that today would not go the way she'd planned. Inspector Rodriguez, Commissioner Washington said. Please proceed. Carmen Rodriguez stood. She was wearing a dark suit, her hair pulled back, her expression carefully neutral. The expression of someone about to deliver devastating news. Thank you, Commissioner. Over the past 3 weeks, I have conducted a preliminary investigation into complaints filed against Judge Patricia Harrington. The investigation reviewed 73 documented cases spanning 6 years, analyzed statistical patterns in case outcomes, examined financial relationships between court personnel and private contractors, and interviewed multiple witnesses who experienced or observed the conduct in question. She paused. Let the weight of the words settle. The findings are substantial. For the next 90 minutes, Rodriguez laid out the case, the statistical analysis, the disparity in hearing times, the pattern of outcomes that correlated with race and representation status in ways that defied random chance, the financial connections between Felix Okonkwo Family First Collections and the Harrington Court. She played audio recordings. Harrington's voice filling the chamber. You people are all the same. Another deadbeat father with excuses. I've seen your demographic before. Sit down before I have you removed. With each recording, Harrington's face grew paler. Knox whispered urgently in her ear. She shook her head. whispered back, the body language of a defense crumbling. When Rodriguez finished, the chamber was silent. Commissioner Washington removed his glasses, polished them slowly. "Judge Harrington, your counsel may respond." Knox stood. He was smooth, practiced, every word calibrated for maximum effect. "Commissioner, members of the commission, my client has served the citizens of Clayton County for 19 years. 19 years of dedicated service. Thousands of cases processed fairly and efficiently. The complaints before you today represent a tiny fraction of her overall caseload, cherry-picked to create an appearance of bias that simply does not exist." He paced in front of the commission table, hands clasped behind his back. Statistical analysis can be manipulated to show anything. Correlation is not causation. The fact that certain demographics experience certain outcomes does not prove discriminatory intent. It may simply reflect the reality that certain populations have higher rates of non-compliance with court orders. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The argument was predictable. Blame the victims. Suggest that black fathers failed more often because they were worse fathers. Wrap racism in the language of statistics and call it objective analysis. As for the audio recordings, Knox continued, context matters. Judge Harrington deals with difficult litigants every day. Occasionally, her frustration shows. That's human nature, not judicial misconduct. Mr. Knox. Commissioner Washington's voice was sharp. Are you suggesting that referring to litigants as you people and making references to their demographic is simply human frustration? I'm suggesting that isolated comments taken out of context do not establish a pattern of bias. 73 cases is not isolated, counselor. Knox paused, adjusted his approach. Commissioner, the appropriate remedy for any procedural concerns would be additional training, perhaps a formal reprimand. What the complainants are seeking removal from the bench is grossly disproportionate to any alleged misconduct. We'll be the judge of what's proportionate, Commissioner Washington said. Please be seated. Knox sat. Harrington leaned over, whispered something. Knox shook his head, the gesture of a lawyer telling a client to stay quiet. The commission will now hear from the primary complainant. Commissioner Washington looked toward the gallery. Mr. Marcus Thompson. Marcus stood, walked to the witness table at the front of the chamber. Every eye in the room followed him. The man in the worn jacket, the father with the child support case, the citizen who'd somehow assembled a federal-level investigation from a standing start. He sat, placed his hands on the table, looked at the commissioners. Mr. Thompson, Commissioner Washington said, please state your full name for the record. This was the moment. 6 weeks of preparation, 4 weeks of documentation, 73 cases, 11 witnesses, thousands of pages of evidence, all of it leading here. My name is Marcus Elijah Thompson. And your occupation? The chamber held its breath. Rosa leaned forward in her seat. James Patterson gripped his cane. Harrington's attorney stopped writing. Marcus looked directly at Judge Patricia Harrington. I am a judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then chaos. Reporters stood. Phones came out. Voices erupted. Commissioner Washington's gavel cracked against the bench. Once. Twice. 3 times. Order, order in this chamber. Marcus didn't move. Didn't react. Just kept his eyes on Harrington. She had gone white. Completely white. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Knox was on his feet. Commissioner, this is highly irregular. The commission was not informed. Sit down, Mr. Knox. The complainant deliberately concealed material information about his identity. This calls into question the entire... I said sit down. Knox sat. Slowly. His face a mask of calculation as he tried to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage. Commissioner Washington turned to Marcus. His expression was unreadable. Judge Thompson, you deliberately withheld your credentials from this commission. I did. May I ask why? Because I wanted the commission to evaluate the evidence on its merits. not because of who filed the complaint. Marcus's voice was steady. The pattern documented by Inspector Rodriguez would be equally egregious if the complainant were a retired postal worker or a single mother working 2 jobs. My position shouldn't make this case more serious. It was always serious. It's been serious for 6 years. The only difference is that now someone is finally listening. Commissioner Washington studied him for a long moment. "Continue with your testimony, Judge Thompson." Marcus turned to face the full commission. "On April 14th, I appeared in Judge Harrington's courtroom for a child support modification hearing. I was representing myself. I came with documentation proving that I had already offered to pay my daughter's medical bills directly. I came with insurance information showing I could add her to my federal employee health plan. I came with correspondence showing that the petitioner had rejected every reasonable solution I proposed." He paused. Let the words sink in. "I was given 90 seconds, not 90 minutes, 90 seconds. Before I could present a single document, Judge Harrington called me a deadbeat father. She said I was wasting the court's time. She said she'd seen my demographic before and knew exactly what kind of father I was." Marcus looked at Harrington. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "When I tried to present evidence, she laughed. The courtroom laughed with her. When I cited the Georgia Code section that entitled me to note my objection, she said, and I quote, 'I don't care what code section you pulled off the internet. This isn't law and order. You don't get to make speeches.'" He reached into his folder, pulled out a document. "This is the transcript from that hearing. Every word verified by the court's own audio recording system. I'd like to enter it into evidence." Commissioner Washington nodded. A clerk came forward, took the document. "When I persisted in asserting my legal rights," Marcus continued, "Judge Harrington ordered security to remove me from the courtroom. I was physically escorted out of a public building for the crime of attempting to present evidence in my own defense." He turned back to the commission. "But I'm not here for myself. I'm here because I'm one of 73 people who experienced similar treatment in that courtroom. I'm here because James Patterson, 73 years old, a retired Army veteran, was denied the right to see his grandchildren because Judge Harrington called him a disruptive influence after giving him 90 seconds to explain his case." James Patterson's hand trembled on his cane. His eyes were wet. "I'm here because Keisha Washington was told she was lucky to have any custody at all when she tried to prevent her ex-husband from reducing his time with his own children. I'm here because Marcus Williams, a father of 3, was jailed for contempt because he asked Judge Harrington to review his disability documentation before increasing his support obligation." Marcus's voice rose. Not shouting, never shouting, but filling the chamber with a weight that couldn't be ignored. "I'm here because the Constitution I swore to uphold guarantees equal protection and due process, not just in federal court, not just for people with law degrees. In every courtroom in this nation, for every citizen who walks through those doors seeking justice." He pointed at Harrington. She flinched. That woman didn't see me as a citizen seeking justice. She saw my skin color and made a decision before I'd spoken a word. She saw a black man without a lawyer and decided I was guilty before I'd presented a single piece of evidence. She laughed at me in open court. She threatened me with jail. She had security put their hands on me for exercising constitutional rights that every American is supposed to possess. Harrington's attorney started to rise. Commissioner Washington's glare stopped him cold. "I've sat on the federal bench for 6 years, Marcus continued. Before that, I spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor. Before that, I was a public defender in Birmingham, Alabama. I've spent my entire adult life in courtrooms. I know what justice looks like. I know what due process requires. And I know with absolute certainty that what I experienced in that courtroom was neither justice nor due process. It was discrimination, pure and simple." He paused, lowered his voice. "Judge Harrington made one mistake. She assumed that because I didn't have a lawyer, because I was wearing a worn jacket instead of a suit, because I was black, that I was powerless. That I had no recourse. That I would pay my fine, accept my humiliation, and disappear like all the others. Marcus shook his head slowly. She was wrong. The chamber was completely silent. I'm not asking this commission to give me special treatment because I'm a federal judge. I'm asking you to give every citizen the treatment I should have received. Fair hearings, the opportunity to present evidence, judges who evaluate cases on their merits instead of making decisions based on skin color and assumptions. He looked at the row of witnesses: Rosa, James, Kesha, all the others who'd trusted him with their stories. 73 people are depending on this commission to finally do what should have been done years ago. Hundreds more across Clayton County have experienced the same treatment but never filed complaints because they'd learned that complaining doesn't work, that the system protects its own, that people like them don't matter. Marcus turned back to the commissioners. They matter. They always mattered. The question is whether this commission is finally ready to prove it. He sat back in his chair. Commissioner Washington was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Harrington's attorney. Mr. Knox, your client may respond. Knox stood, tried to straighten his tie, the gesture of a man buying time. Commissioner, my client, we request a continuance. The information about the complainant's identity fundamentally changes the nature of these proceedings. We need time to... Denied. Commissioner, surely due process requires. Due process, Mr. Knox. Commissioner Washington's voice cut like a blade. Your client has been accused of denying due process to 73 citizens over 6 years. You want to cite due process as a defense? Knox opened his mouth, closed it. Judge Harrington. Commissioner Washington's gaze shifted to the woman at the respondent's table. Do you have anything to say? For the first time since Marcus's revelation, Harrington spoke. I didn't know. Her voice was small, defeated. I didn't know who he was. If I had known, if you had known, Commissioner Washington interrupted, you would have treated him differently. That's precisely the point, Judge Harrington. You would have given him time to present evidence. You would have reviewed his documentation. You would have afforded him the respect and consideration that every citizen deserves. He leaned forward. The fact that you would have treated a federal judge differently than an ordinary citizen is not a defense. It is a confession. Harrington's face crumpled. 19 years on the bench, thousands of cases. A career built on the assumption that she could never be held accountable, all of it ending in a single moment. This commission will recess for deliberation, Commissioner Washington announced. We will reconvene at 2:00 p.m. with our findings. The gavel fell. The chamber erupted. Reporters rushed toward Marcus. Rosa pushed through the crowd to reach him. James Patterson was weeping openly, clutching his cane like a lifeline. You did it, Rosa said, grabbing his arm. My God, you actually did it. We did it, Marcus corrected. You documented for 6 years. Without that documentation, there's no case. But you're the one who made them listen. Marcus looked at James Patterson. The old man was being helped to his feet by Kesha Washington. His shoulders were shaking. Mr. Patterson, Marcus called. James looked up, tears streaming down his weathered face. Thank you for your service, Marcus said, to your country, and to this case. James tried to speak, couldn't, just nodded. The nod of a man who'd waited 4 years for someone to tell him he mattered. Knox approached his face a careful mask. Judge Thompson, I want you to know that my client deeply regrets any perception of impropriety in her courtroom. Mr. Knox, Marcus's voice was ice. Your client called me a deadbeat. She laughed at me in open court. She had security put their hands on me for citing a statute. Perception of impropriety doesn't begin to cover it. I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, counselor. I'm documented. He turned away. Knox stood alone in the middle of the chamber, realizing for the first time that he'd taken an unwinnable case. The recess lasted 4 hours. Marcus spent the time in a conference room the commission had provided. Rosa brought coffee. James Patterson brought stories of his grandchildren. Keisha brought photographs of her kids. They waited together. The way people wait for verdicts. The way they wait for justice. At 1:45 p.m., a clerk appeared. "The commission is ready." They filed back into the chamber. It was packed now. Word had spread. A federal judge accusing a state judge of racial discrimination. The kind of story that would lead every news broadcast in Georgia. Marcus took his seat, looked at the commission table. All 5 commissioners were present, their expressions unreadable. Commissioner Washington banged his gavel. "The commission has reached its findings in the matter of complaint 2024 JCC 4471 regarding Judge Patricia Harrington." He paused. The chamber held its breath. "On the charge of conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice, we find the complaint sustained." Marcus felt Rosa grip his arm. "On the charge of failure to perform judicial duties impartially, we find the complaint sustained." James Patterson's hand went to his heart. "On the charge of violation of litigants' due process rights, we find the complaint sustained." Keisha Washington started crying. Quietly. The tears of someone who'd stopped believing this moment would ever come. "On the charge of creating or perpetuating a pattern of discriminatory treatment based on race, we find the complaint sustained." Commissioner Washington set down his gavel. "Judge Patricia Harrington is hereby suspended from the bench effective immediately. Her judicial pension is subject to forfeiture proceedings under Georgia Code Section 47-23-1 This matter is referred to the Clayton County District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal violations." Harrington made a sound. Small, wounded, the sound of a career dying. Additionally, Commissioner Washington continued, "The commission refers the matter of Court Administrator Felix Okonkwo to the State Bar for ethics review and to the District Attorney for potential criminal investigation regarding obstruction of judicial oversight." The financial relationship between Mr. Okonkwo and Family First Collections represents a conflict of interest that this commission finds deeply troubling. Knox was scribbling furiously, preparing appeals that would take years, delays that would soften the blow. The reflexive resistance of a system trying to protect itself. But the finding stood. The suspension was immediate. And for the first time in 19 years, Patricia Harrington would not sit in judgment of anyone. "Judge Thompson," Commissioner Washington said. Marcus looked up. "This commission owes you an apology. The complaints you documented should have been investigated years ago. They were ignored, buried, dismissed. That failure belongs to this institution, and we take full responsibility for it." He paused. "But more than an apology, we owe you our thanks. You experienced injustice, and instead of accepting it, you fought back. You could have made one phone call and made your problem disappear. Instead, you spent 6 weeks building a case that will protect thousands of citizens who never had your resources or your platform." Commissioner Washington stood. The other commissioners followed. "On behalf of the Georgia Judicial Conduct Commission, thank you for reminding us why we exist." Marcus rose to his feet. 73 cases, 6 years of ignored complaints. One morning in a courtroom where a judge laughed at him and called him a deadbeat. All of it leading to this moment. "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank Rosa Martinez, who documented for 6 years when no one would listen. Thank James Patterson, who never stopped fighting for his grandchildren. Thank Keisha Washington and Marcus Williams and everyone else who trusted that someday someone would care." He looked at the row of witnesses, the people who'd made this possible. "They're the ones who deserve your thanks. I just made sure someone finally listened." The chamber erupted in applause. Marcus didn't hear it. He was looking at Patricia Harrington, watching her collect her things with shaking hands, watching her walk toward the exit with her attorney trying to shield her from the cameras. She paused at the door, turned, looked at Marcus one last time. Their eyes met. He saw fear there, shame, The dawning recognition that she'd spent 19 years destroying lives and had finally been caught. He felt nothing for her. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just the grim recognition that justice, when it finally came, always came too late for the people who needed it most. James Patterson would never get back the 4 years he'd lost with his grandchildren. Kesha Washington would never undo the damage to her custody arrangement. The hundreds of fathers and mothers who'd been processed through Harrington's machine would never be made whole. But the machine had stopped. That was something. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Harrington turned and walked out. The door closed behind her. Marcus sat back down in his chair and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Rosa put her hand on his shoulder. "It's over," she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. "It's not over. It's just beginning. Harrington is one judge in one courtroom. There are thousands of courtrooms across this country where the same thing is happening right now. Thousands of citizens being laughed at, dismissed, removed for trying to exercise their rights." He looked at the commission table, the empty seats where the commissioners had been, the American flag hanging limply in the corner. "This is one battle. The war goes on." Rosa squeezed his shoulder. "Then we keep fighting." "We keep fighting," Marcus agreed. He stood, gathered his folder, walked out of the chamber into a hallway full of reporters and cameras, and questions he wasn't ready to answer. Somewhere in Clayton County, a courtroom sat empty. A bench where Patricia Harrington would never sit again. And somewhere in Chicago, an 8-year-old girl with diabetes was waiting for her father to call and tell her everything would be okay. Marcus pulled out his phone, dialed Maya's number. She answered on the first ring. "Daddy, did the judges help this time?" He smiled, the first real smile in 6 weeks. "Yes, baby. This time the judges helped." The call with Maya lasted 43 minutes. Marcus sat in his car in the parking garage, engine off, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his daughter talk about school, about her friends, about the new glucose monitor her mother had bought that she said was way cooler than the old one. "Daddy, when are you coming to see me?" "Soon, baby, real soon." "You always say that." "I know, but this time I mean it." He could hear Denise in the background, her voice muffled, asking Maya who she was talking to. Maya covered the phone, said something he couldn't make out, then came back. "Mommy wants to talk to you." A pause. Then Denise's voice, colder than Georgia in January. "Marcus." "Denise." "I saw the news." Of course she had. The story had broken while he was still in the chamber. Federal judge accuses state judge of racial discrimination. Every news outlet in Georgia was running it. By tomorrow, it would be national. "I imagine you have questions," he said. "Questions?" Her laugh was bitter. "You let me drag you into family court. You let my lawyer argue that you couldn't afford our daughter's medical bills. You let a judge increase your support payments. And the whole time you were a federal judge. The whole time I was Maya's father. That's all that mattered in that courtroom." "Don't give me that. You played me. You played everyone." "I didn't play anyone, Denise. I experienced what thousands of fathers experience every day. The difference is, I could do something about it. You could have told me. You could have told your lawyer. We could have worked something out without all this circus." "Would we have your attorney rejected every offer I made? You wanted the modification on the record. You wanted leverage." Silence on the other end. "That's not fair. None of this is fair. That's the point." Another silence. Longer this time. "What happens now?" Denise asked finally. "My case gets reheard. By a different judge. With a chance to actually present evidence this time. And the support modification? The one that was supposed to pay for Maya's medical bills. I'm going to ask the court to let me add her to my federal insurance plan. No deductible. Full coverage. She'll be taken care of, Denise. That's what I've wanted from the beginning." He heard her breathe. Processing. "You could have destroyed me," she said quietly. "In that courtroom, in the media. You could have made me look like the villain. You're not the villain. Neither am I. The villain was a system that processes fathers like products instead of treating them like parents. When did you become so righteous? April 14th. When a judge called me a deadbeat and had security put their hands on me for trying to show her pictures of our daughter. Denise was quiet for a long moment. Maya misses you. I miss her too, every day. Summer's in 6 weeks. I know. She's been asking about the beach, the trip you took last year. I remember. Maybe. Denise hesitated. Maybe we can work something out. More time, flexibility, without lawyers and courts and judges. Marcus closed his eyes. 6 weeks ago, he would have jumped at the offer. Now, after everything, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. I'd like that. I'm sorry, Marcus, for the hearing, for what she said to you, for all of it. I know. Do you? I do now. She hung up. Marcus sat in the darkness of the parking garage for a long time, thinking about second chances and broken systems and an 8-year-old girl who just wanted her father to come to the beach. Then he started the car and drove home. The consequences began cascading within days. Felix Okonkwo was suspended from his position as court administrator 48 hours after the commission's findings were announced. The suspension was administrative pending investigation, which meant he still received his salary while lawyers argued about what he'd actually done wrong. But the suspension also meant he couldn't access court files anymore, couldn't bury complaints, couldn't redirect investigations, couldn't protect the system that had protected him for so long. Rosa called Marcus on the 3rd day. Felix is talking. To who? His own lawyer for now. But word is, he's scared. The federal investigation that Inspector Rodriguez mentioned, it's real. DOJ Civil Rights Division opened a formal inquiry this morning. Marcus had expected as much. His contact at the DOJ had confirmed the day before that the complaint package had reached the right desks, the same desks that had been waiting for exactly this kind of case. What about Harrington? Holed up in her house, not answering calls. Her attorney filed an appeal this morning, but it's pro forma. Everyone knows it won't go anywhere. And Family First Collections. That's where it gets interesting. Rosa's voice carried something new. Excitement, maybe. Or vindication. The State Attorney General's office just announced they're opening an investigation into Family First's contracts with 3 county court systems. Turns out Clayton County isn't the only place where judges and collection agencies have cozy relationships. 3 counties. Marcus thought about the pattern Rosa had documented, the financial connections, the kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. Who else is involved? Too early to tell. But the AG's office is subpoenaing records going back 7 years. Whatever they find, it's not going to be pretty. Marcus thanked her for the update and hung up. Then he called David at the DOJ. Marcus, I was just about to call you. What do you have? Enough to open a pattern or practice investigation. The complaint package you assembled is solid. Statistical analysis, financial documentation, witness testimony. My supervisor signed off this morning. How long until you can move publicly? 6 months minimum, probably longer. Federal civil rights investigations take time, especially when they involve public officials and political connections. 6 months. I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but if we move too fast, we risk losing cases on procedural grounds. Better to build it right than to build it fast. Marcus knew the logic, had applied it himself in cases throughout his career. But knowing didn't make the waiting easier. What about the witnesses? Rosa's documentation. Critical. We'll be interviewing everyone who testified before the commission. Building federal case files. The state findings give us a foundation, but federal standards are different. We need to prove not just individual misconduct, but systemic civil rights violations. And if you prove it, consent decree, federal monitoring, court-ordered reforms, the same tools we used in Ferguson and Baltimore in every jurisdiction where local courts have been caught denying citizens their constitutional rights. Ferguson. Baltimore. Marcus remembered those cases. The DOJ investigations that had exposed patterns of racial discrimination in local justice systems. The consent decrees that had forced reforms. The federal monitors who'd overseen implementation. It had taken years. Some of those jurisdictions were still under federal oversight. But the patterns had been broken. The systems had changed. "Keep me informed," Marcus said. "Always." "And Marcus?" "Yes. What you did took courage. Coming forward publicly. Putting your reputation on the line. A lot of people in your position would have made one phone call and made the problem disappear." That's what Rosa said. Rosa's right. The system works because people like you are willing to break it. Marcus hung up and sat in silence for a long moment. The system works because people like you are willing to break it. He'd spent 32 years building that system. Prosecuting cases. Reviewing appeals. Writing opinions that shaped how the law was applied across 3 states. Now he was helping tear it down. Or maybe he was helping rebuild it. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. James Patterson called on the 5th day. "Judge Thompson." "Mr. Patterson, how are you?" "I got a letter." The old man's voice was shaking. "From the Clayton County Clerk's office. They're reopening my case." Marcus felt something unlock in his chest. "Tell me what it says." It says pursuant to the Commission's findings, all cases adjudicated by Judge Harrington are subject to review. It says I can request a new hearing with a different judge. It says..." Patterson's voice broke. "It says I might get to see my grandchildren again." Marcus closed his eyes. 4 years. James Patterson had spent 4 years trying to see grandchildren who'd forgotten his face. 4 years of filed complaints and buried documents, and a system that told him over and over that he didn't matter. "You will see them again, Mr. Patterson. I promise you that. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. You helped build the case. Without your testimony, without your documentation, we wouldn't have had enough to force an investigation. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything." Patterson was quiet for a moment. "My grandson Michael is 9 years old now. Last time I saw him, he was 5. He used to call me Pop Pop. He probably doesn't remember that anymore." "Then you'll remind him. You'll make new memories. That's what grandfathers do." "Judge Thompson." "Yes. Thank you, not just for me, for everyone, for finally making someone listen." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. "I'll see you at the hearing," he managed finally. "I'll be there, with bells on." The call ended. Marcus sat at his desk looking at the photograph of Maya on his bookshelf. Gap-toothed smile, sand in her hair. Her small hand wrapped around his finger. 73 cases. 73 families. 73 second chances that wouldn't have existed if a judge in a worn jacket hadn't refused to accept the unacceptable. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. The media firestorm lasted 2 weeks. Marcus gave 3 interviews, carefully controlled, focused on the systemic issues rather than his personal experience. Every question about Patricia Harrington redirected to questions about court reform. Every opportunity for vengeance transformed into advocacy for change. "Judge Thompson, do you feel vindicated by the Commission's findings?" "I feel concerned. Vindication would require believing that this problem is solved. It's not. Patricia Harrington is one judge in one courtroom. There are thousands of courtrooms across this country where similar patterns exist. Are you calling for a national investigation? I'm calling for citizens to document what they experience, to file complaints even when they think no one's listening, to build the record that forces investigations to happen. Change doesn't come from federal judges making phone calls. It comes from ordinary people refusing to accept injustice. What about your own case, the child support modification? That case will be reheard by a different judge. I'm confident that when someone actually reviews the evidence, the outcome will be different. And your daughter? How is she handling all this? My daughter is 8 years old. She's handling it the way 8-year-olds handle everything. She wants to know when Daddy's coming to visit and whether we're going to the beach this summer. And are you? Marcus smiled. The first genuine smile any reporter had seen from him. Yes, we're going to the beach. Rosa Martinez became a media presence in her own right. 6 years of documentation transformed into expert testimony on every cable news show that would have her. She spoke about patterns, about statistics, about the particular way family courts processed minority fathers differently than white fathers. The data doesn't lie, she said on CNN. 73 documented cases showing disparate treatment. Average hearing time for black fathers 2 minutes. Average for white fathers 5 minutes. Outcomes that correlate with race at rates that cannot be explained by chance. What do you say to critics who argue this is just one bad judge? I say look at the data. Look at the financial connections between judges and collection agencies. Look at the administrators who buried complaints and redirected investigations. One bad judge doesn't create a system. A system creates bad judges. What needs to change? Everything. Recording requirements for all hearings. Independent oversight boards. Statistical audits that flag disparate treatment. Separation between court administration and complaint investigation. The list goes on. Is any of that actually achievable? 2 months ago, people told me Patricia Harrington would never face accountability. They were wrong. Everything is achievable if enough people refuse to accept the unacceptable. The Clayton County Board of Commissioners met 2 weeks after the commission hearing. The agenda officially concerned budget allocations, but everyone knew what was really being discussed. Patricia Okonkwo, the new county attorney appointed after her predecessor resigned in disgrace, presented the reform recommendations. Mandatory audio and video recording of all family court proceedings. Recordings retained for 5 years minimum. Independent Complaint Review Board, separate from court administration. Authority to investigate citizen grievances without interference from judicial personnel. Quarterly statistical audits of case outcomes. Any pattern showing disparate treatment triggers automatic review. Elimination of financial performance metrics for judicial evaluations. Judges evaluated on procedural compliance and case quality, not conviction rates or collection efficiency. The commissioners listened. Some nodded. Some frowned. All of them understood that the reforms weren't optional. The alternative was federal intervention, consent decrees, outside monitors dictating how Clayton County ran its courts. The vote was unanimous, 5-0. Rosa was in the gallery when it happened. She called Marcus immediately after. They passed everything, all 4 recommendations. Implementation starts next month. That's good news. Good news, Rosa laughed. Marcus, I've been fighting for this for 6 years. 6 years of being ignored, threatened, dismissed. And tonight, 5 commissioners voted unanimously for reforms I couldn't have imagined when I started. You made it possible. The documentation, the persistence. Without that foundation, there's nothing to build on. We made it possible. You, me, James, Kesha, everyone who testified. Speaking of Kesha, what's happening with her case? Reheard next week. Different judge. She's cautiously optimistic, which for Kesha is practically ecstatic. And James? His hearing is scheduled for June 3rd. He's nervous. Keeps calling me to ask if he needs to prepare anything different this time. What do you tell him? I tell him to bring the same documentation he's always had. The difference is, this time, someone will actually look at it. Marcus thought about that. The same documentation, the same evidence. The only thing changing was who sat on the bench. That was the system. That had always been the system. Justice dependent not on facts or law, but on the human being who happened to occupy the position of power. Rosa, I need to ask you something. Anything. After all this is over, after the hearings and the reforms and the federal investigations, what happens to the people who didn't file complaints, the ones who were processed through Harrington's courtroom and never knew they had options? Rosa was quiet for a moment. I don't know. The commission ruling only applies to documented cases. The reforms only affect future proceedings. For everyone who came before, who didn't know to fight back, who just accepted the outcome and moved on. They're still living with the consequences. Yes. Fathers who lost custody. Families who were torn apart. People who went to jail because they couldn't pay support amounts that should never have been ordered in the first place. Yes. Marcus rubbed his eyes, the weight of it settling on his shoulders. It's not enough, is it? It's never enough, but it's something. It's more than there was 6 weeks ago. That's what I keep telling myself. Is it working? Some days. Other days, I think about all the people we couldn't help, all the cases we don't know about, all the courtrooms across this country where the same thing is happening right now, and no one with power is there to document it. That's why we keep going, Rosa said. That's why we don't stop. Because the work is never finished. Because every case we win makes the next case possible. You really believe that? I have to. The alternative is accepting that the system can't change. And I've spent too many years fighting to accept that now. Marcus was silent. Get some sleep, Marcus. You've earned it. So have you. Sleep is for people who've given up. I've got 3 new counties to investigate. She hung up. Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he laughed. The first real laugh in weeks. 3 new counties. Of course there were. The pattern didn't end at Clayton County's borders. It never had. But at least now someone was looking. Marcus's own case was reheard on June 10th. Different courtroom, different judge, different outcome. He presented his documentation, the medical bills, the insurance offers, the correspondence showing that Denise's attorney had rejected every reasonable solution. The judge, a white woman in her 50s, named Catherine Morrison, reviewed everything carefully, asked questions, took notes, treated him like a father trying to help his daughter, not a demographic to be processed. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. Mr. Thompson, Judge Morrison said finally, I've reviewed the documentation you've provided. The court finds that the petitioner's request for increased support is rendered moot by your offer to add the minor child to your federal employee health insurance plan. Marcus felt his chest loosen. Additionally, the court notes that the respondent has consistently demonstrated willingness to address the child's medical needs through alternative means. The petitioner's rejection of these offers suggests that the modification request was not primarily motivated by the child's welfare. At the petitioner's table, Denise's new attorney shifted uncomfortably. The court denies the modification request. However, the court strongly encourages both parties to work together cooperatively for the benefit of their daughter. Children thrive when parents communicate, not when they litigate. Judge Morrison looked at Marcus, then at Denise, who was present in person this time. Is there anything else either party wishes to address? Denise stood slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to withdraw my objection to Mr. Thompson's insurance proposal, if he's willing to add Maya to his plan. I think that's what's best for her. Judge Morrison nodded. The court accepts the withdrawal. Mr. Thompson, you'll work with the clerk to ensure the paperwork is processed promptly. Yes, Your Honor. Then this matter is closed. Morrison paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Thompson, I read about your experience in Judge Harrington's courtroom. What happened to you should never happen to any parent seeking to help their child. I'm sorry you experienced it. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank the reformers who are trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's where the credit belongs. The gavel fell. The hearing ended. Marcus walked out of the courtroom and found Denise waiting in the hallway. That went better than I expected, she said. It went the way it should have gone the first time. I know. She looked down at her hands. Gerald and I talked last night about Maya's summer visit. What did you decide? We think it should be longer this year, if you want. A month instead of 2 weeks. More time for her to be with you. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Something he'd been holding together for 3 years, since the divorce, since the custody arrangements, since Maya moved to Chicago, and he started counting days instead of living them. I'd like that very much. She misses you, Marcus, more than she says. She keeps your picture by her bed, the one from the beach last year. I have the same one, on my bookshelf. Denise smiled, a small, sad smile. We really messed things up, didn't we? We made mistakes, both of us, but Maya doesn't have to pay for them. No, she doesn't. They stood there for a moment, not as adversaries, not as ex-spouses with lawyers and courtrooms and leverage, just as two parents who'd somehow found their way back to something that looked like understanding. I'll call you next week, Denise said. We can work out the details. I'll be waiting. She turned to go, then stopped. Marcus? Yes. What you did, exposing Harrington, fighting for all those other families. It was brave. I want you to know I see that, even if I didn't before. Thank you, Denise. Maya should know her father is a hero. Marcus shook his head. I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who got lucky enough to have power when I needed it. The heroes are the ones who fight without power, the ones who document and testify and refuse to give up even when no one's listening. Maybe, but you're still going to be the one she brags about at school. Denise smiled. A real smile this time. Then she walked away. Marcus stood in the hallway of the Clayton County Courthouse, the same building where he'd been laughed at and threatened and removed, the same hallway where a security officer had told him he'd end up like all the others. He wasn't like all the others. He'd had power, privilege, resources that most people would never have. But for one morning in April, he'd been just another black father in a system designed to process him. And that morning had changed everything. Not just for him, for 73 families, for a county court system being forced to reform, for a federal investigation that would reshape how family courts operated across 3 states. All of it starting with 90 seconds and a judge who laughed. Marcus walked out of the courthouse into the June sunshine. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Daddy, Mommy said I can stay a whole month this summer. Can we go to the beach? He typed back. Yes, baby. We're going to the beach. I promise. Then he got in his car and drove home, already counting the days until summer. Summer came the way summer always comes to Georgia. Slowly at first, then all at once. Marcus picked Maya up from the airport on the last day of June. She came running through the terminal with her backpack bouncing, her braids flying, her gap-toothed smile visible from 50 feet away. Daddy! He caught her in his arms and lifted her off the ground. 8 years old, 47 pounds, the weight of everything that mattered. I missed you so much, baby. I missed you too, Daddy. Mommy said I get to stay a whole month. That's right, 31 days. Can we go to the beach tomorrow? How about the day after tomorrow? Let you settle in first. Okay. She pulled back, looked at his face with the particular intensity of a child studying something important. Daddy, you look tired. I am a little tired, sweetheart. Is it because of the bad judge? Marcus hesitated. Denise must have explained some of it. Or maybe Maya had seen the news coverage. Kids understood more than adults gave them credit for. Partly, but that's over now. Mommy said you helped a lot of people. She said you were brave. Mommy said that. She said sometimes daddies have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Marcus felt his throat tighten. That's exactly right, baby. Sometimes we do. Did you win? He thought about Patricia Harrington suspended and disgraced. About Felix Okonkwo facing criminal charges. About 73 families getting their cases reopened. About James Patterson, who would see his grandchildren next week for the first time in 4 years. We won, baby. We won. Maya grinned. Good. Now can we get ice cream? Marcus laughed. The sound surprised him. It had been a long time since laughing came easily. Yes, sweetheart. We can get ice cream. They walked out of the airport together, Maya's hand in his, the Georgia sun falling warm across their shoulders. James Patterson's custody hearing happened on July 3rd. Marcus wasn't there. He couldn't be there officially. A federal judge sitting in the gallery of a state family court proceeding would raise questions that nobody needed to answer. But Rosa was there. She called him from the courthouse steps 30 minutes after the hearing ended. He got them back. Marcus closed his eyes. Tell me. Joint custody. Weekends to start. Holidays alternating. The judge reviewed everything he'd prepared 4 years ago. Everything that Harrington refused to look at. She said the evidence clearly demonstrated his commitment to his grandchildren's welfare. How did he handle it? He cried. Right there in the courtroom. When the judge read the ruling, he just broke down. Started thanking everyone. The judge, the bailiff, the clerk, everyone who'd listen. What about the grandchildren? They were there. The mother brought them. Social services recommended it as part of the transition. Rosa's voice caught. The oldest one, Michael, 9 years old. He walked up to James after the ruling and said, "Are you my pop-pop?" Just like that. "Are you my pop-pop?" Marcus couldn't speak. James said, "Yes, son, I'm your pop-pop, and I'm never going away again." The line was quiet for a moment. Both of them processing. Both of them remembering what it had taken to get here. He's taking them to the park this weekend, Rosa said finally. First visit in 4 years. He asked me to tell you thank you. He said he'd call you himself, but he's not sure he can get the words out without crying. Tell him he doesn't have to call. Tell him to focus on his grandchildren. That's all I need to hear. I will. Rosa. Yes. Thank you. For 6 years of documenting. For never giving up. For being there when no one else was. Don't get sentimental on me, Judge Thompson. We've got 3 more counties to investigate. Wouldn't dream of it. She hung up. Marcus sat in his study looking at the photograph of Maya on his bookshelf. James Patterson had his grandchildren back. 4 years too late. Thousands of days lost that could never be recovered. But at least there would be new days now. New memories. A chance to be pop-pop again. It wasn't justice. Justice would have been those 4 years never being stolen in the first place. But it was something. And sometimes something was enough. The federal investigation moved slowly through the summer and into the fall. David from the DOJ called with updates every few weeks. Witness interviews. Document subpoenas. Financial forensics tracing the connections between Family First Collections county court systems and the political figures who'd protected them. We've identified 7 judges in the network, David said during an October call. 3 in Georgia, 2 in Alabama, 2 in Florida. All of them with financial ties to collection agencies. All of them showing the same statistical patterns of disparate treatment. What about political connections? That's where it gets complicated. 3 of the judges were appointed by governors who received significant campaign contributions from companies affiliated with the collection agencies. Proving quid pro quo is difficult. But not impossible. Not impossible, just time-consuming. We're building the case piece by piece. Financial records, email communications, testimony from people inside the network who've decided cooperation is better than loyalty. Felix Okonkwo. Singing like a bird. His lawyer negotiated a cooperation agreement in August. Full testimony about how complaints were buried, how investigations were redirected, how the system protected itself. What does he get in return? Reduced charges. Probably 18 months instead of 5 years, plus protection from retaliation. Marcus felt something twist in his gut. Felix Okonkwo had spent years destroying families, burying complaints that could have stopped Patricia Harrington years earlier, profiting from a system designed to extract money from vulnerable citizens. 18 months didn't feel like justice, but it never did. The people who designed corrupt systems rarely faced the consequences that ordinary people faced for ordinary crimes. That was the truth of power. It protected itself even when it couldn't protect everyone. What's the timeline for public action? 6 months, maybe less. The evidence is strong enough to move forward, but we want to make sure we capture as much of the network as possible before anyone has a chance to cover their tracks. And when you move publicly, consent decrees for the affected jurisdictions, federal monitoring for at least 5 years, court-ordered reforms that will reshape how family courts operate across the Southeast. That's something. It's more than something, Marcus. It's unprecedented, a federal civil rights intervention in state family courts. The DOJ has never done anything like this before. Then let's make sure we do it right. That's the plan. The call ended. Marcus returned to the opinion he'd been writing, a civil rights case from Alabama, a plaintiff who'd been denied due process in a municipal court. The irony wasn't lost on him. Patricia Harrington's appeal was denied in November. The Georgia Court of Appeals upheld the Judicial Conduct Commission's findings unanimously. Permanent removal from the bench, pension forfeiture, professional reputation destroyed. She gave no interviews, made no public statements, simply disappeared into the particular anonymity of people who'd once been powerful and weren't anymore. Marcus heard about the ruling from Rosa, who'd been tracking the case obsessively. It's official. She's done. How do you feel? Honestly, empty. I thought I'd feel, I don't know, triumphant, vindicated. But mostly, I just feel tired. 6 years of fighting will do that. It's not just the fighting. It's knowing that even with everything we did, she still got away with most of it. 19 years on the bench, thousands of cases, hundreds of families affected, and she walks away with nothing except a lost pension. No criminal charges. The DA declined to prosecute, insufficient evidence of criminal intent. The same excuse they always use when powerful people do terrible things in plain sight. Marcus understood the frustration. He'd seen it countless times in his own career. The gap between what the law should punish and what the law actually punished. She's 73 years old, he said. No pension, no reputation, no authority. Her name is going to be synonymous with judicial misconduct for the rest of her life. Is that enough? It's never enough, but it's what we have. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. I keep thinking about all the cases we don't know about. All the fathers who were processed through her courtroom and never realized they had options. They're still out there living with consequences that should never have been imposed. Some of them will come forward now. The publicity has given people permission to speak up. Cases that seemed hopeless suddenly seem possible. And the ones who don't come forward, the ones who gave up years ago. We can't save everyone, Rosa. We can only save the ones who let us. I know. I just wish it were different. So do I. The line went silent. Two people who'd spent months fighting a system that resisted every attempt to change it. Two people who'd won and still felt like they'd lost. What happens next for you? Marcus asked. 3 new counties. The data analysis is almost finished. Same patterns, same financial connections. Different judges, different administrators, but the same machine. You're going to take them all down. I'm going to try. That's all I can do. That's all any of us can do. Marcus hung up and stared out his window at the November sky. Gray clouds gathering. Winter coming. Somewhere in Georgia, a courthouse sat empty of Patricia Harrington for the first time in 19 years. A small victory. An incomplete victory. But a victory nonetheless. Maya came for Thanksgiving. 4 days instead of the usual 2. A negotiation between Marcus and Denise that had happened without lawyers for the first time in 3 years. Progress. Healing. The slow reconstruction of something that had been broken. Daddy, can we make the turkey ourselves this year? You want to cook a whole turkey? Grandma said she'd help. She said it's a Thompson family tradition. Marcus looked at his mother, who was sitting in the kitchen with a cookbook open on her lap. Mama, did you tell her about the turkey tradition? I might have mentioned it. We haven't made a turkey together since I was 12. Then it's about time we started again. Maya bounced on her heels. Please, Daddy, please, please, please. Marcus looked at his daughter, 8 years old. Gap-toothed smile, eyes full of hope. Okay, baby. We'll make the turkey. Yes. Maya pumped her fist. Grandma, I told you he'd say yes. They spent Thanksgiving morning in the kitchen together. 3 generations. Marcus basting the turkey while his mother supervised, and Maya measured ingredients for stuffing with the particular intensity of a child determined to do everything perfectly. Daddy, why do we put butter under the skin? Because it keeps the meat moist. What's moist mean? It means juicy, flavorful, not dry. Oh, Maya nodded seriously. That makes sense. Marcus's mother laughed. She reminds me of you at that age, baby. Always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. I was not that curious. You were worse. Remember when you took apart the toaster to see what made the bread turn brown? I put it back together. After it caught fire. Maya giggled. Daddy set a toaster on fire. Your father was a very curious child. Mama, you're undermining my authority here. Authority. His mother waved her hand. You're not a judge in this kitchen. You're my baby boy who burned a toaster. Maya laughed harder. Marcus tried to look stern and failed. Fine. 1 toaster. 35 years ago. I've grown since then. Have you? I'm a federal judge. Who still can't make coffee without burning it. Maya was crying with laughter now, clutching her stomach, the measuring cup forgotten in her hand. Marcus looked at his mother. She was smiling. The smile of a woman who'd watched her son become a judge, become a crusader, become national news, and still saw the little boy who'd asked questions about toasters. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Now baste that turkey before it dries out. The turkey was perfect. They ate together in the dining room, 3 generations around a table that had held 4 generations, once before Marcus's father passed, before Denise left, before everything got complicated. This is good, Daddy. Thank you, sweetheart. Way better than the turkey Mommy's husband makes. Maya, Marcus said gently. Gerald is your stepfather. You can call him Gerald. I know, but his turkey is still dry. Marcus's mother snorted, then tried to disguise it as a cough. What? Maya asked innocently. It is. After dinner, after pie, after Maya had fallen asleep on the couch with her head in her grandmother's lap, Marcus stepped outside onto the porch. The night was cold. Stars visible through gaps in the clouds, the particular silence of a suburban neighborhood on a holiday evening. His phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you're enjoying family time. He typed back, I am. You working. The data from Fulton County just came in. Same patterns. Worse, actually. It never stops, does it? No. But neither do we. Marcus smiled. Put the phone away. Looked up at the stars. 6 months ago, he'd stood in a courtroom and been laughed at by a judge who assumed he was nobody. 6 months ago, he'd walked out of a courthouse with a security officer's hand on his arm, being told he'd end up like all the others. He hadn't ended up like all the others. But that was only because he'd had power most people would never have. Resources most people would never access. A platform most people would never reach. The system had changed because someone inside the system had fought to change it. That was the truth of power. It protected itself until someone with power decided to challenge it. James Patterson had his grandchildren back. Keisha Washington had her custody arrangement restored. 73 families were getting second chances they'd never thought possible. But there were thousands more, millions more, across courtrooms in every state. Fathers and mothers processed like products, children treated like bargaining chips. Justice dispensed in 90-second increments to people who'd learned that fighting back was pointless. The work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. But it was something. And something, as Rosa kept reminding him, was what you built on. The DOJ announced its findings in February. Marcus watched the press conference from his chambers. David at the podium. Behind him, the logos of the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division. Today, The Department of Justice announces the completion of its investigation into family court operations in Clayton, Fulton, and DeKalb counties in Georgia, as well as Jefferson County, Alabama, and Duval County, Florida. The cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Our investigation found reasonable cause to believe that these court systems have engaged in a pattern or practice of conduct that deprive citizens of rights protected by the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Specifically, we found systemic denial of due process to pro-se litigants, disparate treatment based on race and socioeconomic status, financial relationships between court personnel and private collection agencies that created conflicts of interest and coordinated suppression of citizen complaints. David paused. Let the weight of the words settle. The department is today filing consent decrees with all 5 jurisdictions. These decrees mandate comprehensive reforms, including recording requirements for all proceedings, independent complaint review boards, statistical monitoring of case outcomes, and separation between court administration and complaint investigation. Federal monitors will oversee implementation for a minimum of 7 years. A reporter shouted a question. What about criminal charges? 15 individuals are facing federal charges related to this investigation. These include 3 former judges, 4 court administrators, and 8 individuals associated with collection agencies that participated in the scheme. The charges range from civil rights violations to wire fraud to obstruction of justice. What about the political connections, the campaign contributions to governors and attorneys general? David's expression didn't change. Our investigation is ongoing. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads. Marcus muted the television, sat in silence for a long moment. 7 years of federal monitoring, 15 people facing charges. Consent decrees that would reshape how family courts operated across 5 jurisdictions. It had started with 90 seconds in a courtroom. A judge who laughed. A father who refused to accept the unacceptable. Now, it was the largest federal civil rights intervention in family court history. Not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Spring came, then summer again. Maya turned 9 in August. Marcus threw her a birthday party on the beach. The same beach where they'd taken that photograph 2 years ago. The one that still sat on his bookshelf. The one she still kept beside her bed. Make a wish, baby. Maya closed her eyes, squeezed them tight, then blew out the candles in one breath. What did you wish for? Can't tell you, Daddy. Then it won't come true. Fair enough. They ate cake on the sand while the sun set over the water. Maya Marcus, his mother, Rosa James Patterson, and his grandchildren. Keisha Washington and her kids. A gathering of people whose lives had intersected around a single moment of injustice. Thank you for inviting us, James said, watching his grandchildren build a sandcastle with Maya. Michael talks about her all week. When's Maya's birthday, Pop Pop? Can we go to the beach, Pop Pop? She talks about him too. When can I see Michael again, Daddy? Kids don't care about court cases and federal investigations. They just want to play. That's how it should be. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I got the call last month from Michael's mother. She asked if I could take them every other weekend instead of just every other Saturday. That's wonderful. It is. But here's the thing. James turned to look at Marcus. She said she'd been scared of me for 4 years because of what Harrington told her in court. Your father-in-law is a disruptive influence. He's probably the reason your husband had problems. That's what the judge said, and she believed it. But she doesn't believe it anymore. She said she watched the news coverage, saw my testimony, realized that Harrington said the same things about everyone, called everyone disruptive, made everyone feel like they were the problem. James shook his head. 4 years of fear, based on nothing. Based on a judge who made assumptions about people before they'd finished their first sentence. Marcus thought about Patricia Harrington, sitting in her house somewhere. No pension, no reputation, no understanding probably of the damage she'd caused. How does that make you feel? Angry, sad, relieved, all of it at once. James watched his grandchildren pack sand into a bucket. But mostly grateful. Grateful that I get to be their pop-pop again. Grateful that someone finally listened. Grateful that when Michael asks me to tell him a story at bedtime, I can tell him about how his grandfather fought back and won. What do you tell him? I tell him that sometimes the world isn't fair. Sometimes people make decisions about you based on what you look like instead of who you are. But if you keep fighting, if you keep documenting, if you never give up, eventually someone will listen. Eventually things will change. That's a good story. It's the only story I know how to tell. Maya came running up, sand covering her legs, her braids flying. Daddy Michael wants to know if you can help us build a moat. Marcus looked at James. James smiled. Go build a moat, Judge Thompson. Some things are more important than federal investigations. You're probably right. I'm always right. Ask my grandchildren. Marcus laughed and let Maya pull him toward the sandcastle. The sun was setting. The water was warm. His daughter's hand was in his. Somewhere, courtrooms were being reformed. Somewhere, federal monitors were reviewing compliance reports. Somewhere, the system that had processed fathers like products was being forced to change. But here on this beach, none of that mattered. What mattered was sand and water, and a 9-year-old girl who wanted her father to help build a moat. He knelt in the sand beside Maya and Michael and began to dig. 1 year later, Marcus wrote an opinion. The case was about due process in family courts. A father in Alabama who'd been denied the opportunity to present evidence. A judge who'd made assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. A pattern that echoed everything Marcus had experienced in Patricia Harrington's courtroom. He wrote the majority opinion, 5-4. The kind of close decision that could have gone either way. The key passage would be quoted in legal journals for years. Due process is not a privilege reserved for those with resources. It is not a courtesy extended to those the system deems worthy. It is a constitutional right that belongs to every citizen who walks into every courtroom in this nation. When courts deny that right based on assumptions about race, class, or appearance, they do not merely fail individual litigants. They fail the Constitution itself. A father standing before a family court seeking time with his children is not a case number to be processed. He is a citizen exercising rights that the 14th Amendment guarantees. Those rights do not diminish because he cannot afford a lawyer. They do not disappear because he is wearing a worn jacket instead of a suit. They do not evaporate because someone in power has decided before hearing a single word of evidence that he does not matter. He matters. He has always mattered. The only question is whether the system will finally recognize it. Marcus submitted the opinion on the anniversary of his hearing in Patricia Harrington's courtroom. April 14th. 1 year to the day since a judge had called him a deadbeat and had security put their hands on his arm. The opinion became precedent, binding law across Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. 37 million Americans protected by words that Marcus had written because he'd experienced what it felt like to be denied them. Not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. The story doesn't end. It never ends. It continues in every courtroom where a father stands before a judge and hopes to be heard. In every filing cabinet where complaints wait to be reviewed. In every family that was torn apart by a system that valued efficiency over justice. James Patterson sees his grandchildren every other weekend now. Michael calls him Pop Pop. They go fishing on Saturday mornings. Keisha Washington won full custody. Her ex-husband's visitation reduction was reversed. Her children know their mother fought for them. Rosa Martinez runs a legal advocacy organization with offices in 3 states. 32 employees. Hundreds of cases documented every year. Felix Okonkwo served 14 months. He works at a grocery store now. Nobody remembers his name. Patricia Harrington died in her sleep 2 years after her removal from the bench. The obituary mentioned her 19 years of service. It did not mention the 73 families whose lives she'd disrupted. It did not mention the federal investigation her conduct had triggered. It did not mention the reforms that came too late for too many. Maya turned 12 last month. She's in middle school now. She still keeps that photograph by her bed, the one from the beach, her father's hand around her finger. She asked him once years ago why he'd done it, why he'd gone to that courtroom in a worn jacket, why he'd let himself be humiliated, why he hadn't just made one phone call and made it all go away. He told her the truth. Because I needed to know, baby. I needed to know what it felt like to stand in a courtroom without power and try to be heard. I needed to understand what millions of people experience every day. I needed to see with my own eyes whether the system I'd spent my life building actually worked for the people it was supposed to protect. Did it? No, not the way it should have. So you changed it. I tried. Other people tried too. We're still trying. Is it better now? Marcus thought about the consent decrees and the federal monitors and the reformed complaint systems. He thought about James Patterson and Keisha Washington and all the families who'd gotten second chances. He thought about all the families who hadn't, all the cases that were never documented, all the fathers who'd given up and walked away. It's better than it was, he said finally. But it's not as good as it should be. That's sad. That's the truth. What do we do about it? Marcus looked at his daughter. 12 years old, eyes full of questions. The same eyes that had looked at him from across an airport terminal 6 years ago, asking if the judge had helped. We keep fighting, baby. We keep documenting. We keep refusing to accept the unacceptable. That's all we can do. That's all anyone can do. Maya nodded, the serious nod of a child who was learning what the world looked like when you paid attention. Okay, Daddy, we keep fighting. That's my girl. He hugged her, held her close. Outside, the sun was setting. Another day ending. Another day, closer to the next case, the next complaint, the next father standing in a courtroom hoping to be heard. The work was never finished. It would never be finished. But it was something, and something was what you built on. Marcus Thompson had walked into a courtroom wearing a worn jacket and walked out a crusader. He'd fought a system that had laughed at him and won. He'd helped 73 families get second chances and triggered the largest federal civil rights intervention in family court history. None of it erased what had happened. None of it brought back the years that James Patterson had lost with his grandchildren. None of it undid the damage that Patricia Harrington had caused to thousands of families across 19 years on the bench. But it changed the future. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. And that was all anyone could do. Fight the battles you can fight. Document the patterns others ignore. Refuse to accept the unacceptable. Build something better. One case at a time, one family at a time, one moment of justice in a world that too often denied it. Marcus Thompson had stood in a courtroom and been told he didn't matter. He'd proven them wrong. And somewhere right now, another father was standing in another courtroom hoping someone would finally listen. The fight continued. It always continued. Because justice wasn't a destination. It was a direction. And the only way to get there was to keep walking, keep fighting, keep believing that something better was possible. Marcus Thompson believed. He always had. He always would.